What's up guys, Damianer122 and it's deck profile day. Now this is a special deck profile because I teamed up with Yugi Nono in order to do a double deck profile across our two channels so you guys can get a different spin on this deck and depending on what your intent with that deck is. Over at his channel, we have a more competitive build. It's not exactly in the spirit of the deck, but I do believe that it is completely tiered in order to play against the current meta. So if you're taking that to a regionals, you might actually fare pretty well. However, if you're going to take it to a locals, you will find that its heavy emphasis on anti-meta play may actually hurt you in the long run because it doesn't have a very good rogue matchup. So you may want to play a more casual build like the one I'm about to show you because it's a little more just generally adaptive, if that makes any sense. So be sure to check out his version of the deck. I will put a link in the description as well as I'll probably pin a comment. Hopefully he'll do the same. And let us know down in the comments below what you guys think of both decks and what you think is your favorite build. But anyway, let's get started. Alright, here is the first rendition of the Relinquished deck that Yugi Nono and I were working on at the start of the day. This is where we began, and it ends up being a pretty solid casual build of the deck if you really want to play with the, I guess, the spirit of the deck, as it were. Basically, the point of this deck is to abuse your Relinquished's effect with things like your Millennium Eyes Illusionist and your Relink Kuriboh as material in order to make the actual ritual summon itself, as well as using Relinquished Fusion in order to summon your Millennium Eyes Restrict, which also combos with your Millennium Eyes Illusionist, so you basically have one or two different ways of actually absorbing monsters from your opponent's side of the field. And to help support that, we also have 2 Instant Fusion in here, which is how we get to our Thousand Eyes Restrict, the classic, which is one more way we can actually get this off, and it combos well with our Millennium Eyes Illusionist. For people who don't know what Millennium Eyes Illusionist is, it is a hand trap. It is a dark level 2 spellcaster. It says you can discard this card, then target one effect monster your opponent controls, equip that target to an Eyes Restrict monster or Relinquished, either the 2 fusions or Relinquished, as if it was equipped by that monster's effect, because the way they're worded is they can only equip monsters to themselves by their own effects, so this thing needs to pretend that it is using the effect of the other monsters. If an Eyes Restrict fusion monster or Relinquished is special summoned, you can add this card from your graveyard to your hand. So even if you're forced to use this thing as like tribute material for your Black Illusion Ritual, it will still come back to your hand, as well as if you dump it with your Foolish Burial, you can search the card that way as well. Your Relink Kuriboh is probably the #1 thing you want to be using in order to summon Relinquished in this deck, because when it is tributed, you draw 1 card. Basically letting it pay for itself so you don't neg yourself so hard in order to summon Relinquished. And if a monster would be destroyed by battle, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead, which is really cool because one of Relinquished's inherent flaws is that its battle protection only counts once. So if it's attacked twice, that second one is most certainly going to kill it because it'll have 0/0 attack. So it's nice to have an extra, I guess, battle protection in the wing so that you can actually keep this thing alive for a turn. Or I guess you could always use Millennium Eyes Illusionist because this is a quick effect as well in order to force a second equip. So there is different ways in order of protecting your Relinquished. We got our 3 pre-prep in order to search this thing, and we've got our Radian, the multi-dimensional Kaiju, as a kind of a thing in order to deal with non-targetable monsters, turn them into something that your Relinquished can suck up. The other main aspect of the deck is, like I said before, Millennium Eyes Restrict, which is their newest, this is their new support. This thing is really, really cool, and it's basically a retrain of Thousand Eyes Restrict, even though their applications are a little different. Millennium Eyes Restrict is a level 1 fusion dark spellcaster effect monster that says it's made of Relinquished, specifically, and 1 effect monster, it doesn't matter what. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, which this is a quick effect, you can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls or 1 in their graveyard, equip that target to this card that you control. This thing gains the attack and defense of all the monsters equipped, that kind of just summed up, as well as any of the equipped monsters to this thing's, their activated effects are negated, meaning if you, if they like play a hand trap or whatever, you can activate this thing, suck up the hand trap, and then it gets stuck to this thing, and then the hand trap will fail to resolve, and they can't keep using it. So this thing's actually really, really, really nifty, especially if your opponent is like forced to actually activate an effect. And Thousand Eyes Restrict is the other fusion we are playing. Basically the idea is you play this thing with instant fusion, and just like Relinquished, you can actually force this thing as an ignition effect to suck something up. So its application is a little different. It's not a quick effect, unlike Millennium Eyes, but Millennium Eyes is reactive, so sometimes Thousand Eyes is the better target. In either situation with all 3 of these monsters, your Millennium Eyes Illusionist will force a monster on their side of the field to be equipped to that monster. I guess it's of note to say that Millennium Eyes Restrict is the only one that can have more than one equipped to it. The rest of the deck is pretty self-explanatory. Your Relinquished Fusion is the main way you are summoning your Millennium Eyes Restrict, and there's really no good way of searching this thing outside like Predaplants, which we found was pretty bricky. So we just put a bunch of draw power in this deck in order to dig in order to get this thing. It is interesting to note that this thing is a quick effect, so if you wanted to play some crazy Card of Demise build, that is totally your option, because you could just set this and then activate it during your opponent's turn, and you would still be able to special summon your fusion summon, rather, your Millennium Eyes Restrict. The cool thing about your Relinquished Fusion is it banishes the material, which is kind of lame, but it can do it from the hand, field, or graveyard. So if you milled things or discarded things in order that you would have wanted to use as the fusion material, this can get them out of the graveyard as well. So again, like I said, Card of Demise or something like that isn't totally out of the picture, because this thing is a quick play and it can get materials out of the grave. Interesting combos that I would like to go over is, like, for instant fusion, you can actually summon El Shadal Winda instead of Thousand Eyes Restrict. It will die during the end phase, but you can always bring it back with something like Monster Reborn or Soul Charge in order to actually get that floodgate happening longer. Or you could even summon out it with instant fusion and then go into your Underclock Taker to force it to the grave and then immediately special summon it back from the grave this way. So that way it doesn't die during the end phase due to your Instant Fusion's effect, which, though, remember, Instant Fusion is a proper fusion summon. That's why you're allowed to Monster Reborn. Another interesting combo that you can do is with your Link Karibo. Any of these guys, Thousand Eyes, Millennium Eyes, or Relinquished, are all level 1s, meaning you can suck up your opponent's monster, and then you can summon Link Karibo with it, and then use your Monster Reborn or your Soul Charge to get one of those guys back in order to suck up something else. So it's kind of a neat little double removal you can do. It makes your Monster Reborn and Soul Charge kind of get a little farther. The rest of this extra deck is pretty much just interesting things. Like, I guess I put Liraluz Grease Rectal Starling in here because I'm citing the DD Crow. I figured this thing can make rank 1s. That's about all it's going to be making. But if you're going to ever make a rank 1, Princess Sprite's probably the better of the options, because you're just digging for spells, because you have tons of spells in this deck, and they seem to be kind of what you really, really want. The reason why we strayed away from this deck for the more competitive version was because we found ourselves dumping too many resources into actually trying to summon Relinquish, because it is a old school ritual monster, so it is clunky and it's costly, and it kind of railroads the whole strategy of the deck, because we have to play things like Manju in order to search the parts, and Manju does directly compete with your Spellbook Magician of Prophecy for the normal summon, and even though there's only 2 Spellbook Magician of Prophecies in the deck, Blue Boy is the biggest normal summon hog you have ever met in a deck, because he wants to get normal summoned, he wants to get searched, and he wants to get draws. So if you decide to do Manju, you're completely foregoing your +1 draw engine for that entire turn, which is a little frustrating. So this ended up being a little clunky, like I said, because your old school ritual monsters, Manju is a great card for it, but it railroads the deck and makes it a little clunky. But it is the spirit of the deck. Obviously the deck was intended in order for you to summon Relinquished. Other than that, I guess we got our Allure of Darkness for draw, and we got tons of targets for it. That's always an option. And that good Upstart Goblin really rounds us out to a nice lean 40. For the side deck, we had really no idea what to do, because the deck really wants to go second, which means if it's forced to go, let's say, first game 2, because normally, let's say you won the duel going game 1, you probably either they went first or you opted to go second. So either way, you went second game 1. So they might understand that and make you go first game 2, which gives you a whole myriad of traps in order to stick in this thing, because if you can't really make a very good board going first, so you might as well just play some traps in order to try to mitigate their next turn, so that you can actually then go ham turn 3. And we thought that, Royal Decree would be good against Paleos, pretty much auto win, and Unending Nightmare would be pretty much good against, it's an auto win against Pendulums, which are probably the 2 decks this is going to have the most trouble with, because both those are extremely reactive at intelligent responses. It can build really crazy boards that have tons of negates and stuff, so we figured those would probably be the best options for those. Your Zombie World was my little personal choice, because you don't really want to play Mask of Restrict against your True Dracos, because that's going to shut off Relinquished and going to be really annoying, but we still want to stop them from, playing a big, unaffected by monster effects thing like Masterpiece, so Zombie World's a good way of actually stopping them from doing that. It is searchable. You could probably try to fit a Terraforming in here if you wanted to, but again, it's just a turn-off Tribute Summons without turning off Ritual Summons card, so I thought it was kind of clever. Like I said, you got the DD Crow, and this is the new spicy tech of the format if our Trickstars end up being that solid tier 2 deck that everyone seems to think they're going to be, and this is basically just a hand trap that lets you negate any effect damage you would be taking. During either player's turn, when your opponent activates a monster that would inflict damage, You can discard this card and negate the activation. When your opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then draw one card. If that card's a monster, you can special summon it. Although we're probably not going to ever draw into a monster with this thing because we're not running a very low monster count. But if it does special summon the monster, you force them to attack that monster instead. I just thought it was neat because you can, against Trick Stars, you can just pitch this thing, negate some effect damage, and then try to attack you directly or something because they probably dealt with your board. You get an extra little draw. It's a nifty little thing. It's a level 1. It's got some synergy with the deck. So it's a neat little kind of choice, and I'm wondering if it'll help. And you can also probably use it against the Pendulum FTK deck if that doesn't get emergency banned. But yeah, that is your more traditional Relinquished deck, the more casual build, although I really like it. I think Relink Karibo is probably my favorite part of the deck. You really just want to dig for this thing like crazy. Alright guys, that was my deck profile. Remember to head over to Yugi Nono's channel to check out his version of the deck. Like I said, his is a little more anti-meta, a little more geared towards competitive play. Mine's more for taking to locals and doing okay in like a, maybe a 4-round Swiss or something in order to kind of cheese out some victories against people who don't really know what the deck does. Either way, I believe both decks are quite fun to play, and this is an awesome thing because this deck is based around Relinquished, and that is actually one of our mutual favorite cards in this game. We've been trying to build a Relinquished deck for a very long time. I think one of our other collabs was, again, another Relinquished deck. So the two of us have been really invested. Like we took like 6 hours. We sat there and we grinded for so long to try to get these two done. And I think we eventually came up with two decks that are quite interesting and fun to play. Let us know in the comments below what you guys think is your favorite build of the deck. And remember guys, if you don't troll the meta, who will? I'll see you guys next time.
Wait just a moment. I can see you were about to click the subscribe button. Was I right? Tell me I was right. I was right? My Millennium Eye lets me see everything, including these other videos by Davy Boy. Don't be a stranger. You will always be welcome in my Toon World.